Welcome, everyone. Woo! Yes. Thank you all for being here tonight. It's almost night, I'm going to say tonight. I'm Dr. Ciani. I'm the Curator of Education and Public Programs at the Davis Museum. And I am pleased to kick off not only the Davis's opening celebration, but also the first event of Art 150, a 3-day celebration of Wellesley's creative legacy. Woo! Everyone at the Davis is very grateful to collaborate with the music department and the art department on this exciting series of programming. After this talk, we look forward to seeing you at the party, which starts in the Davis lobby and in the galleries at 5 p.m. I know you are all eager to see in focus Wellesley College faculty artists. I sure am. I've been peeking. Woo! I've been sneaking in there all week. This semester, we welcome back Dr. Carrie Cushman, who spent 4 years as the Linda Wyatt Gruber Class of 66, Curatorial Fellow in Photography at the Davis before becoming the Edith Dale Monson Gallery Director and Curator at the University of Hartford's Hartford Art School. She has just begun a new position as a director of the Bates College Museum of Art. Woo! Congratulations! We are proud to present her exhibition, The Worlds of Ilse Bing, which is now on view in the Levine and Friends of Art galleries in the Davis Museum. We are also very grateful to Suzanne Ciani, class of 1968. Woo woo! And some classmates as well, whose gifts formed the core of the exhibition and indeed inspired it. And I will say I've been very inspired by your music. We also want to thank Linda Wyatt Gruber, class of 66, for funds to support both the postdoctoral fellowship and this marvelous exhibition on the photographer Ilse Bing. I am now pleased to introduce my colleague, Felicity Salmon, who is the music program and concert manager in the music department.
Thank you. Okay, on behalf of the music department, I sincerely thank the Davis for our collaboration on this Arts 150 celebration. It's really been a pleasure to work with the whole Davis team. I'm now going to plug the Arts 150 celebration a little bit further before we get going. Tomorrow, Arts 150 continues with the opening reception of the Jewett Art Gallery's exhibit, A Question of Imagination and Taste, the Jewett Art Center, Then and Now, curated by Samara Perlstein, the Jewett Art Gallery director. The exhibition is all about the design, history, and contemporary life of the wonderful Jewett Art Center that we all have so many stories about. So pop by anytime between 4:30 and 6 p.m. tomorrow to view the exhibit with the gallery director on hand to answer any of your questions while on your way to Alumni Hall, where you will witness Suzanne Ciani in concert. That concert will be at 7 p.m. We are so honored to welcome Wellesley College alumna Suzanne Ciani for a performance of Improvisation on 4 Sequences, originally documented in her 1976 report to the National Endowment for the Arts. Witnessing Suzanne perform on the Buchla live is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and you do not want to miss this concert. So please come tomorrow night at 7 p.m. after the Jewett Art Gallery's opening reception. But then there's more. So we conclude Arts 150 on Saturday evening back in the Jewett Arts Center as we present Sounding Legacy, Celebrating Faculty Composers, a vibrant celebration of the music department's rich musical legacy. Members of our incredible performance faculty will honor the enduring contributions of past and present faculty composers in a very varied and eclectic program. Also a concert you will not want to miss. Both of these performances are presented by the Wellesley College Music Department Concert Series, and the Suzanne Ciani concert is presented in collaboration with the Davis Museum. I hope to see you at both of these fantastic concerts. It is my privilege to introduce to you Suzanne Ciani, Wellesley class of 1968. She is a 5-time Grammy Award-nominated composer, electronic music pioneer, and neoclassical recording artist who has released over 20 solo albums, including 7 Waves, The Velocity of Love, and Neverland, which you will be able to hear in the Suzanne Ciani Sound Lounge later tonight. She was inducted into the first class of Keyboard Magazine's Hall of Fame, alongside other synth luminaries, and received the Moog Innovation Award. Suzanne provided the voice and sounds for Bally's groundbreaking Xenon pinball machine. I wish I could pull it up right now so you could hear her voice. It's so good. Created Coca-Cola's Pop and Pour sound, and is one of the most successful female composers in the world. A life, yes, yes. A Life in Waves, a documentary about Ciani's life and work, and happens to feature the Wellesley College campus when she was inducted into, or was when she received the award, the Alumni Achievement Award in 2015. I think it was 2015. So the campus is featured in this documentary. It is available to watch on all digital platforms, and I highly recommend you checking that out. So please, a very warm welcome to Suzanne Ciani and Dr. Carrie Cushman.
Okay, hi everyone. It's so good to be back. Thank you, Suzanne Ciani, for that lovely introduction, and Felicity as well. It's just such a pleasure to be here with Suzanne. Let's see.
It's a dream come true. We've thought about this for a long time.
Yes.
So it's really special to share this moment, this birthing of something that we've wanted for so long.
Speaking of the so long, the story of this exhibit goes back to 2018. I do want to also thank Amanda for, even long after my tenure as the Gruber Fellow, allowing me to continue this project, as well as the former museum director, Lisa Fishman, who said, I really think you should keep working on this, and I'm so glad we did. So Suzanne's very generous gift of photographs by Ilse Bing came to the Davis at the same time I did. In 2018, this is a photo from these events we used to do where we would show off recent acquisitions and gifts during the semester. And this was one of my first encounters with the photographs. Immediately, I was really starstruck on multiple fronts. First, by the photographs themselves, many of them original vintage prints made by Ilse in exquisite condition. I was starstruck by the Davis and the fact that I was lucky enough to be the one in charge of stewarding a collection that was worthy of a gift like this. And the more that I learned about the donor, I was very starstruck by Suzanne, another woman like Ilse Bing who totally shifted the landscape of her creative field. In our first conversation, I think it was in 2019, it became clear to me that these photographs represented and embodied not just the story of Ilse Bing, but of a relationship, the relationship between Suzanne and Ilse, the story of their friendship and female mentorship, and really the importance of female mentorship in their two distinct fields, photography and electronic music, which I think were united by the fact that when you all were starting your careers, these were really the cutting edge creative technologies. Suzanne has been an incredible resource throughout this project. She shared her personal archive of correspondence and materials related to Ilse and her career, some of which is happily on view in the exhibition. And among the things that you shared with me, Suzanne, early on was a video recording of an artist talk that Ilse Bing gave in 1985 on the occasion of her retrospective exhibition at the New Orleans Museum of Art, which coincidentally is the museum I grew up going to as a native of New Orleans. And in that presentation, Ilse is talking about what it was like working as a photographer in the 1920s and 30s. For some context, this is a moment when artists were really actively debating the role of photography and the photographic medium and what it meant for modern art and what it meant for modern life. And people like Ilse were really pushing for photography to come into its own and embrace the fact that it was made with a machine. And come up with a visual language that suited that mechanism, as opposed to, for example, just trying to imitate paintings with photography. Ilse said of that time, "It was a fascinating time because everything was new. We had nothing to hold on to. One didn't know what modern photography was. We walked on untrodden ground." And this quote really became the jumping off point for me in curating the show, where I just thought, wow, like we know the story of modern photography now, but to have been in it in the moment and imagining what it could become. And so that's the premise for the show that you'll see later tonight, which, we're trying to draw these kind of formal visual comparisons with the other people in her creative worlds to see how she and others navigated this untrodden ground. And this is where I want to start. I wonder, Suzanne, how this lands with you thinking back on your early career. Does this idea of untrodden ground resonate at all?
I think you've shown the parallel precisely, and I think that's what connected me so much to Ilse. Ilse, I met her when she was about, she was 80. She was born in 1899, so you always knew how old she was from the year. And I met her in about 1980, and that would make her 81. I'm not quite 81, but close to it. There are my classmates that will attest. So I felt so lonely because I had, after Wellesley, I landed in Berkeley, and I went from a traditional music composition life, I was getting a master's in composition, to an explosion into a different direction, which was electronic music, because I met the inventor who designed the first analog modular electronic music instrument. We did not use the word synthesizer. And that's a very important distinction. But this was a technological art form, and nobody understood it. And I met Ilse. I was also collecting photography, but that's a different story. But I have an art photography collection, and Ilse was, do you want me to keep going about all these stories? Because,
I think this is one of the first photographs that you collected of Ilse's.
Yes, that's in my studio now, and it is an inspiration for me. She was called the Queen of the Leica. So we look at this photograph and we think, that it's a lovely photograph, but in her time, the idea of showing movement and blurriness didn't happen. That wasn't okay. That wasn't acceptable in proper photography. And it was because she used a 35 millimeter camera, and she could do things like that. And she could, show up and take a picture without posing it. No big camera, no big negative. So, and if things blurred, fine. So she was developing a new language, visual language of photography. And I, in my life, was developing a new language of compositional music through electronics. And the parallels are stunning, but our friendship was magnetic because she was my touchstone. She was the woman that I could talk to, and that, if you knew Ilse, she had the enthusiasm of a child at all times. I mean, she would say, Suzanne, tell me about your work, And I thought, my work? Who cares about my work? I mean, I'm having boyfriend problems. I can't pay my rent. I mean, tell me about your ideas, And I started to see the world through her vision of art.
Suzanne, what came first, collecting her photography, or did you meet Ilse first? And what was the initial meeting like?
I was collecting photography. I would go to Sotheby's and, all the auctions in New York. And one day I met, through friends, a Russian photographer named Leonid Lubyanitsky. And he noticed in my collection something by Ilse Bing. And he said, would you like to meet her? And I just talk about starstruck. Yeah.
You've spoken, and you alluded to it just now, but you've spoken and written about, as your relationship developed with her, how much you identified with her as an artist, how much you identified with her spirit. Can you tell us more about some of the specific parallels that you saw between the two of you?
One of them that really struck me strongly was her artistic life, just the span of it. I met her, she was in her 80s. She had had a motorcycle accident in her late 70s. I mean, she was a very young 80s person. And the thing that struck me was that she gave up photography when she was 60. And this frightened me no end because I didn't understand what that meant. And since my life seemed to be in her footprint, I kept thinking, oh my gosh, am I going to lose my art when I'm 60? How does that happen?
But did she really lose it?
No, I didn't know that. And now I understand it all. Because my own life is at so many musical chapters. I started with, traditional Wellesley counterpoint and piano. Then I went into electronic music. Then I went back to the piano. Then I went back to electronic music. Yeah, that was the first round of electronics. So my New York was Ilse's Paris. I went to New York, and when she talks about arriving in Paris and the roots going down into the earth and the liberation, her feeling of independence.
She says that she was like the chick inside the egg, and then when she got to Paris, she finally broke out of the egg.
From the moment I got out of the airplane in Manhattan, my life was taken over. I never went back. I lived in California. I had moved to LA. I never went back. I called and said, put everything in storage. I'm here. I'm in New York. And New York was, the challenge and the hope.
Thinking more about your artistic parallels, when we were looking at the photo of the dancers, you talked about the importance of movement in Ilse's work and representing movement. And that was, it's hard to imagine, but it was truly radical at the time. And I'm struck about how you also speak about how in your work you deal with There's this fantastic documentary I recommend everyone watch if you haven't already seen it, called Sisters with Transistors. That's the history of women's contributions to electronic music, and Suzanne features prominently in it. And in that, you talk about the malleability of electronic music, and you talk about it as motion. Ilse, in those Paris years, when she's, coming into her own, was also really preoccupied with capturing this feeling of energy, with capturing the liveliness and the energy of the city that she was falling in love with. It's amazing. This is a photograph of music stands that she has somehow made to seem like they're just flying through the air. So I wonder if you can talk a little bit about the idea of movement and how it manifests in your work and Ilse's work.
When we study music composition, we start in the history and we learn how it was done for centuries. It evolved and it started in counterpoint, and then they've discovered harmony and transitions of harmony. And then they did sonata form and developmental. There was a structure, the backbone of the evolution of music, Western music, you could say. And we're looking at her against the backbone of visual art in general. So for me, every time I discovered something new, I could relate it to the history of music somehow, because I was, a composer. But it's when 12-tone music, for instance, came in, that was a system. Composers were searching for ways to structure pitches that were new. Well, in electronics, and then Western music just went down a tunnel. It got more and more complex. And the composer, in order to look good, had to make very difficult music. And all of this went on and on and on. And the poor audience, would have to listen to this chaos and feel, well, was that good? Was that, do I like this? Am I supposed to like this? What is this? And, then there was a reaction to all of this. And that was in my lifetime, Philip Glass and the white notes and all of that. But in electronic music, you were insulated from that whole conversation in a way, because there was no such thing as difficulty. The machine could do anything. It could play faster than a human. It could hold a note longer than a flute player with circular breathing. I mean, there were no limits. And once you discovered the mechanisms, the knobs and the dials that affected the changes, you had immense power. I use randomness as a controlling mechanism. So it's as valid as any musical structural principle. And I relate it to nature itself. So people think, maybe I'm going on a tangent here, but this is a small tangent. Okay. So people think of, people look at electronic music and think it's out of control. Like, oh, that machine has a mind of its own. Doesn't it surprise you all the time? I mean, it's really, nobody can figure out what it's going to do. And it's not like that. So when I say randomness, I don't mean chaos. I don't mean we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, look at a tree and you see leaves and they're not all alike. And that's an aesthetic gift, that there's variation within a structure. So I can control the amount of randomness and the place where it goes, and it can bring life to the sound. The problem with where electronic music went commercially was that the keyboard became the known delivery system for the sound. And that was so boring because you got, one note, one action, and one note. I can get 1,000 notes with one key push, So it was a very limited concept of what electronic music was about. And that's what took over. So I was in the 60s and 70s. By the 80s, it was over because nobody understood it. And then we went through the 90s and the 2000s, and the big companies came in and the keyboards got bigger. And then lo and behold, in the 2000s, I guess, somewhere around there, the kids said, I know technology is supposed to go forward, but we want to know what we missed. And they went backwards. And that's why I'm here today, because I had a second chance to do my analog modular electronic music live performance. And so this is a very, very exciting time for me. And I think it's historically, I don't know how this relates to Ilse. I just know that I do. You do? Okay. We're a good team. Take it away.
Well, this is going to be a little self-indulgent, but I want to talk about that tree and the leaves on the tree, because when you were describing that, it feels to me like, and obviously I did not know Ilse like you did. I did not know her. I feel like I know her, and I feel like that's something she would say about photography and about what she's doing with the camera is, being attuned to like the spontaneity of the world and these small moments that say so much. And what strikes me about the way that you were talking about your music and Ilse's photography is that, yes, you're using words like spontaneity and randomness, which feel very light, but you're also both like deeply skilled and technical. I'm not going to be able to say the long word for the synthesizer, but and her in the dark room, right?
Yes, the dark room. Yeah, that's where the magic happened.
Yeah, and she's so you'll have the joy of seeing in the show like just how masterful she was in the dark room with her ability to control tones. And to experiment too, though. Now I'm going on a tangent. We often credit Man Ray with the invention of solarization, but Ilse came up with it totally separately on her own, and there's an example of it in the exhibition. Okay. But what I wanted to ask about the tree is, are these what your conversations with her were like when you all got together and she said, tell me about your work? Were you all getting into the nitty-gritty technical, or was it more philosophical? It's probably also important to mention that Ilse's spouse, her life partner, Conrad Wolf, was a very important composer in his own right, who I think
musicologist.
Musicologist.
Had
a important relationship with. So what, when you all would get together, what would the conversations be like?
Well, it was very funny, actually, because I had this wonderful dual relationship with that couple, because Conrad, I could talk music theory with him, and with Ilse, we could talk photography and life. And she didn't like to share. So if I were talking with Conrad, she would say, okay, Conrad, you have 15 minutes. And she'd go in another room. You can have her now, but I'm coming back in 15 minutes. And so our conversations were very cubbyholed in a way. with Ilse, again, it was about energy, the same way music became about energy. So it's a life force, what she had. And I'm sorry you never met her, but if you hear her voice, you can hear it. So she was childlike in her creativity. You know, if you look at a child and their enthusiasm and lack of fear and immediacy and all of that, we lose that because our brains get too complex. And she was masterful at being able to be a child. She was a child in a very brilliant mind.
In the exhibition, we've included some of the objects from Suzanne's archive related to Ilse. Among them is a poem that Ilse wrote called Play, and I think it encompasses what you're talking about. So I encourage everyone to take a moment and read that poem in the show. Continuing to think about the parallels between you two, you both forged very successful commercial careers for yourself, in addition to your, what you might say, the art you were making for yourself. Turning your art into something that you could really live on. Ilse did things like fashion photography, photojournalism, portrait sessions. And we heard earlier tonight references to your iconic Coca-Cola, that sound. Thank you. I've been practicing that. Suzanne was the first woman to score a major Hollywood feature. Based on what I know of Ilse, it seems to me that whatever genre she was working in, whether she was making a portrait or I think I included some of her, photographing boots for Vogue. It seems that she brought the same goal to her work, which was to capture the essence of her subject matter. I wonder if you could tell us how you think about your commercial career in relationship to your more experimental compositions.
My commitment now is to live performance. And that's a very special subset of electronic music. Because electronic music, in the world of electronics, you have tape recorders and production and studio albums, and you can go into the studio for forever and hone and finesse and do surgery on sound. And that's what I did a lot in my sound design. That was a surgical procedure with sound. But what I'm most committed to now is the original vision of Don Buchla. And this was a vision that didn't have any parallels, really. I mean, he said, this is an instrument in the family of instruments. It can be performed live. And out of that concept came a design that nobody else came close to, and they're still not quite getting it. So Don Buchla, the reason I'm committed to him too is because I want to close the gap in the understanding of what these instruments can do. So to make a performance instrument, it can't be a digital instrument where you have to go up and, excuse me 1 second, I have to check this menu. I'm going to go down and choose another sound now. I'll be back. Or simply playing back recorded material. That's not very interesting. So, I'm not against it. I have room for everything. There are no rules. And Ilse knew that. She was out of the box. And I think being out of the box is a very fertile ground to be in. So I always forget what I was saying.
It's all great.
Oh, live performance, right. So, live performance, in order to have that, you have to have a machine that talks back to you. When you do something, it lights up in a certain way. Don Buchla made all these distinctions, different cables of different colors that were the length, 2 different types of cables, one for control voltages, one for audio signals, sequencers that could be, controlled in different directions and transposed. The use of randomness, a random voltage generator that gave you amazing control over random voltage. Just spatial sound. So from the beginning, I worked in quadraphonic. Even though quad, it was in fashion in the early 70s, then it disappeared. My early concerts in New York were in quad. I was supposed to play in Lincoln Center, and they couldn't, for the life of them, figure out why I needed 4 speakers, and they refused. And my performing career came to an end because I had no place to play. There was no understanding of what this was. So, so what did I do? I said, I guess we need to build new theaters, and I started working on building new theaters. And, my whole life has been in the path of one goal, which has just been to manifest this love that I have of the freedom and the joy that I get playing this instrument. It's also agonizing. I mean, that somebody just gave me a cartoon. It's 2 little panels, and the top one says, "Welcome to heaven. Here is your harp." And the one below says, "Welcome to hell. Here is your Buchla."
That's great.
Yeah. It's the truth is always funny.
For how technically complicated it sounds, one of the themes in that documentary, Sisters with Transistors, is about the relationship between electronic music and the sounds of everyday life. The sound of a passing bus, of an ambulance, of a whistle. And the idea that this particular genre of music can help attune and sharpen our ears, so that things in everyday life start to sound like music, like compositions, like music with a capital M. And of course, similar arguments are made about photography all of the time, its ability to isolate and find beauty in otherwise, very mundane, unmonumental moments in our everyday life. I wonder just your thoughts about actions.
When you think about the instant that a photo represents, when you think about the instant that it represents and the immortality, the continuity that it achieves through the print, the concept of time, I think Ilse lived in the present the way I like to live in the present with performance. You can't do that without being absolutely alive in the moment. And, spiritually, we have this long investigation of, being here now, being in the present, and how do you do that? That's one way to do it. You're in the moment. Oh, that moment I pick. I'm in the moment. And when you're performing, it's the same thing. You're alive. Ilse was so alive, and that's the energy that she brought to her work. Yeah.
Amanda and I were talking about the flow state earlier today, actually in relation to Ilse's poetry. I'd love to hear more about your artistic collaborations with her. As you mentioned, Ilse famously gave up photography in 1959. She said, "I've said all I need to say with this medium," and moved into other artistic expressions, poetry, collage, drawing. She ran a dog grooming business. Oops, a schnauzer. That's her schnauzer staccato. And it was at this time that you all began to collaborate, and we were lucky to have an example of a collaboration in the show. Can you tell us about how that came about? Did it feel like it was inevitable would work together, or was it scary for you?
It was the last piece on the album. So I knew that I wanted to do something special and something different. And I had the idea, my compositional form came from waves. Sound waves, maybe, I don't know, ocean waves. I still think the wave is probably the building block of the universe. But it was my compositional form. And I wanted to do a piece, and Ilse said, "Oh, I will write, a poem in the shape of a wave." And she did it. She did that. Every word is chosen for its perfect place on the trajectory of the wave. And they're single words, and they go up to highs and down to death and up to stardom and down. I'm on the downward curve now towards the end. And this was a map of my life that she made. Yeah. And she was very upset when the record company didn't produce her wave, her collage. They just put her poem as a strip on the bottom. Yeah. No sensitivity in that realm to art. But anyway, so we did that. So I did each word. I treated each word as a sound design. So if you listen to it, every word is designed to poeticize the sonic poetry of the meaning of that word. Death, light, life, whatever. But anyway, that was the final piece. And it was, it was a spiritual journey for me with Ilse. Oh, and I used some of the latest technology too. In those days, they had a new headphone system shaped like a head. There was a head and two microphones on either side. And if you listen to that piece carefully, the movement of the words, the last word happens right inside your head. The last word, just listen. Yeah.
So it's the last song on the album Neverland, which incidentally was the first album that you received a Grammy nomination for, correct?
Yeah, it was the first time they had a category. Yeah.
I have a few more questions, but I also want to be sensitive to time and make sure that our audience has an opportunity to ask you questions.
Hi, I wanted to ask about, I know you kind of touched on how electronic music evolved throughout your lifetime. I know I wanted to kind of ask more about that, what your opinion of how the art has kind of evolved, or maybe stayed, I don't want to say stagnant because it's not, but paid homage, I feel like, maybe, you know.
What was that word?
Homage.
Oh, an homage. Okay. Well, I think what's changed and what's brought me hope is the resurgence of the analog modular musical instrument, which is now mostly Euro-rack. Do you know Euro-rack? Okay, so yeah, these are the new breed of analog modular musical instruments, and people are performing them now. And it's, you know, there are thousands of different modules, and people are, you know, going broke buying them, and, you know, they can't get enough. And it started in Germany. A guy named Depfer made the first, you know, and he picked a format that was a little smaller than what I use in the Buchla, because Buchla thought, and he said, well, how big is a hand? You know, how big does a module have to be so that somebody can interface with it and control it? And, you know, now these new instruments which have taken off, I'm happy. I'm happy that the you know, the genre, the possibility has come back, but I'm a little distressed by the fact that they didn't take off at the peak of where we had been. But anyway, I think it's exciting. Analog modular is where it's at right now. Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Ching-Ru, and I'm a current first year at Wellesley. And throughout like the talk, I've noticed like you've spoken a lot about like how you were grounded in like your path, and like you knew some like the aspirations that led you to how like who you are today, basically. And you also touched upon like Elsa, like thinking outside the box, and like that spontaneity of like following your passion and not kind of like following the wave, but leading the wave and like finding your way. So I was just wondering if you have any like advice or like words of wisdom for, I don't know, freshmen or like people trying to navigate their way in the world, I guess, to just like, how do you find that path, and how do you like find the courage to follow what you want to do?
Good question, because you know, I had an ambition early on. It was in music. So that was my guiding star. I didn't know what it was going to look like, but I had an idea. So I had already carved out some region. So ask yourself, if there's some region of the universe that speaks to you in particular, that resonates, that, you know, that's you. And I went away from it at times. I made mistakes. I said, you know, oh, I can't make money at this. I have to do something else. When I was at Wellesley, I was going to go to law school. And my professor, Hubert Lamb, I was supposed to get a recommendation from the professor in my major, and he refused. Yeah, it was because of Hubert Lamb that I didn't go to law school. So, yeah, where is he now? So, you know, it's... So, you know, sometimes you need support. And maybe somebody else will see in you what you don't even see in yourself. But it's there, right? There is something that makes you feel alive. And that's what you want to follow. And then the other things are just problem solving. How do I get enough money to do what I want to do? How do I mean, you kids have a really tough time now. I mean, I'm sure there are some people who are 1%ers, but most people, you know, the burdening of youth now, from my perspective anyway, is punishing. So I don't know that my life story you're going to have a more difficult time. I'm just like, but yeah, thank you. Don't worry, it's all going to be great.
Any other questions? Excellent. I'm going to pass it this way. Can we make that happen, friends? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hi. I just wanted to ask about, because you were talking about performing in this style and with these tools that were just so completely new to everyone. If you could share a little bit about what that felt like more as like a student or as a creator, kind of learning how to use these technologies and not necessarily having a super long history with them to kind of learn from, but learning from your own innovations.
I always found, and particularly because I played an analog modular electronic music instrument, that it was empirical. I thought of that instrument as a friendly thing. And there were no courses. You couldn't study it. There were no manuals. You couldn't read anything about it. You simply developed a relationship with it, which means you would be with it. Just be with it. Don't, you don't have to learn anything or know anything. You just spend time with it and you discover just through that being with it. And that's progress. The problem for me was that after I was being with it and spent 10 years, just having a great time, I went out, into the world and nobody understood it. That's a different problem, because then you have to educate your audience. Sometimes people don't know what you're doing and they don't know how to take it in. They don't know how to experience, and you might have to be responsible for helping them to know how to receive your communication.
Carrie, do we have time for one more? I'm gonna leave it. Is there one more? I knew there would be. I had faith in y'all.
Well, I have many more, but I'm gonna do one more that I'm very curious about, and it's a very simple one. Having had the life that you had, like in so many different venues and creative places that you've been involved with, this seems to be a very important collection for you. Why Wellesley? Why the Davis Museum to be the repository of such an important part of your life and an important relationship?
I am so grateful to Wellesley. This is a home for me. And when I first saw the facility at the Davis Museum and the high level of, one of my goals is to preserve these photos. And I saw the level of care that went on in this museum, and I felt safe. I said, this is a good place. They're going to take good care of her work. I worried a little bit that they might be passed around for classes and mangled, and no, I'm only kidding, because I know you'll all wear white gloves. Yeah, no. Yeah, no, and this, this exhibit for me is I can relax now, because I know I can give you the rest of the collection. I was like, because I just care about this work. I have lots of other photographs. I have Ansel Adams and this and that and this, but I really care about Ilse's work. And that's why I brought it here, because this is a good, safe, intelligent well-equipped, ongoing, amazing place. And it's a women's college.
Thank you, Suzanne, for entrusting the Davis with this beautiful collection, and thank you for sharing so much with us tonight. It's a real treat, real honor.
Thank you. Thank you, Carrie.